we do need also to be aware that what we encounter in some scriptural narratives of God, God's will and action, do look suspiciously like superstition at times. Just enter the world, for example, of 1 Samuel, the Hebrew prophets, the early Hebrew prophets. What you read there, if you read it dispassionately, is a world of nomadic, tribal prophets using mysterious objects called Umim and Thummim. Nobody knows what, perhaps stones kept by the priest, and using them to divine the divine will, discern it. And in a way which is rather superstitious looking. Elsewhere, in the older strands of the Old Testament especially, you find that same world of prophets singing and dancing to gain visions, telling stories to interpret dreams, claiming God told them directly how to kill their enemies, and perhaps to engage in ethnic cleansing. Now, these are images which do seem to depict God very crudely, as a force who can in some sense be captured or confined in physical objects like stones, and then manipulated through human activity like dancing or singing, simply to underwrite the needs and identity of the tribe. Hardly different at all, it seems, from some of those fictional ancient gods of Homer and the Iliad or other tribal gods around them. Homer's priests actually do dig around in the entrails of goats to divine the divine will, discern it. Is consulting Urim and Thummim to find out the will of Israel's God so very different? Yes, in great pivotal moments of those dramas of the Hebrew Bible, God is expressed differently, with more reticence, more metaphor, more mystery, acknowledging the transcendence. But what warrant have we for accepting that as the real truth being conveyed by the Bible, when historically those images are so closely tied with these other, cruder, apparently superstitious, pre-modern images? Here again, to deal with this, I want to enlist the help of the Jewish philosopher and critic I mentioned briefly last week, Erich Auerbach, and his book, Mimesis. His description there of the qualitative difference that does appear in at least those key biblical narratives of encounter with God. His description of the mystery there, conveyed in the lack of physical detail about God, as compared to the over-defined descriptions of Homeric literature and others, that not only needs re-emphasizing, but it can actually take us to a further point now. Namely, that this undoubted strand of a really, truly more sophisticated, if you like, transcendent notion of God actually becomes determinative in the Hebrew and Christian Bibles, because it becomes a clear trajectory within them. So, for example, by the Babylonian exile, even of the 6th century BC, when we come to the prophetic tradition, the tradition collected in oracles under the name Isaiah, for example, the mystery and the transcendence of the meaning of God and the purposes of God is absolutely unequivocal. God there is certainly being grasped as, I quote, the everlasting Lord and Creator, not only of one tribe or people, not even just of the earth, but of heaven and earth. A reality still personal, but transcending all the normal categories of this world. One, I quote, to whom we can liken nothing and nobody. To whom will you then liken God? Have you not known, have you not heard? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, whose inhabitants are like grasshoppers. His ways are not our ways, his thoughts not our thoughts. This is a God who owes her being to nothing else, and cannot be manipulated in any way and not even compared to anything else. And once we realize this is the trajectory in Scripture, we realize why we can strip out, if you like, the remnants of its superstitions, because it's an indication, in Auerbach's own words, that something must have happened. Something happened, I quote, that never happened in ancient Greece or in most surrounding tribes. Something happened to the Judeo-Christian tradition of God, which, without making it jettison its personal quality to God, cut it free from its own limitations and crudities, and marked out its transcendent qualities as irresistible. What happened? In one sense, we don't know, and we don't need to know. We simply can call it revelation. On the other hand, its most decisive moment in this tradition, for the Christian certainly, is knowable, at least in terms of being able to locate it as a definite event in history, in public history, even if the details of the event, of course, may still be opaque. It's what happened through the events of Jesus Christ above all, his life, death, resurrection, and ascension, and the experience of the Spirit which followed, are events which conveyed above all this experience of God as a personal, communicative presence, yes, but one who was also non-tribal, transcendent, and so on, one knowable universally in spirit and in truth, not limited to a particular visible human body or object. That's the meaning you get in St. John's Gospel, in much of St. Paul's writings, and in the writer to the Hebrews, in particular, as they unfolded that meeting of God in their writings. They were, in fact, the first truly reflective Christian theologians, I suggest, right from within the biblical material. Historically, there's no doubt this sort of thing happened. A radical perception of God did take root from right within the biblical world, one in which both the personal and the truly transcendent came to be held together.